Hey everyone, welcome to the show. End of July. We've got an interesting one here. I really enjoy valuetainment. I like the whole panel. I think it's great. They're controversial. This is definitely a controversial one. Is the American dream dead or it's not fair? Millennials complain about the American dream. Let's just put this, we'll watch the first 30 seconds of this. Once again, I love valuetainment. I love Patrick Bet-David. We're going to get into this in chunks because it's a very long video. It's 20 minutes long. We're not going to watch all of it, believe me. And I think my response, I think, will surprise people. I think if you read the comments in this video, holy smokes, they get roasted hard. But let's just start this off and watch the first little clip here.
Majority of people now say it's impossible to achieve the American dream. Again, the headline, how do you feel right now? I agree. If you said, I agree, you just gave up and they win, right? Listen, majority believe American dream is unattainable. A Newsweek poll reveals that 54% of Americans think it's increasingly difficult to achieve middle-class status. Among millennials, 57 find the middle class unachievable, followed by 59% of Gen Xers, 48% of Gen Zs, and 51% of baby.
So they run through and they mentioned who this influencer is. They actually worked at an investment bank, so to give them a bit of credibility as well. They're positioning that if you agree, then you've already lost. Now, okay, I get from what they're saying is that you have to have a mindset. We talk about mindset as well. You don't want to give up before you start. I get it, but we have to deal with a reality and a mindset. The reality is a couple of things, and they're going to touch on it quick, is what's the American dream? And my argument is we know what the American dream is. It's historically always been the same thing. It's the house with the white picket fence, being married, having a family, having a dog, having a yard to play in. That's traditionally been the idea. It's very aspirational. And we're going to go through them redefining what that could mean. Which is fair to some extent, and we'll get into that. But really, if you say to someone in the West what the dream is, it is that aspirational. I can have a car, I can have a house, I can have a bit of free time, I can have all those costs of livings taken care of. There's energy, there's food on the table. I've got all those bare necessities, plus I have some entertainment time. I get to have a more fulfilling life. That's the dream. That's what it's been. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll get lots of ranges, of course, by generation and age. But traditionally, when I think of that, that's kind of what sticks in mind, certainly from my frame of mind. And if you frame that to a young person today, they may differ, but they'd also say, I can't even think of that. That's inconceivable. And that's what this whole video is about. And let's take the next little step here and jump in and see. We're going to jump into the 1 minute 19 mark or so and get a little bit more context.
Aspirated this trend. Tom, your thoughts? I got a lot of thoughts on this, but I want to hear yours first.
Whenever I see American Dream, I always say to people, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? I feel like I'm in an episode of The Princess Bride. That word doesn't mean what you think it means, inconceivable.
Inconceivable.
Right. So when I say American Dream, I said, what do you mean? What does that mean to you? What are you trying to achieve? Because if you automatically paint a wall in front of yourself and say, well, that's the American dream, I can never get over the wall, that's a negative thinking. So the question is, what does that mean for you? What do you mean American dream? What did you just talk about? Positive forward planning and optimism, you and Pat. Yep. You know what? I want to look forward and see maybe I find a 3-bedroom place to put myself in a prep.
So this goes on, and it's good. I mean, we don't want to redefine the definition, but we don't want to reframe it. But we do want to put it into context. And also, they're attacking this from an angle of mindset. Don't be defeated. And I agree. Don't be defeated. And but we can't just kind of gloss over the cost of living issue. And let me just jump in here quickly before we get into further context on that side. The salary needed in the U.S. If we look at Visual Capitalist just the other day, another great site I really like. They've put out wonderful information all the time. If we pull that up, we can see the salary needed in the U.S. is over $100,000 a year, which is a payment of $2,435 to buy, on average, a $389,000 home. If you look at like San Jose, houses are $1.8 million. kind of like in Vancouver or to some degree Toronto. The average U.S. income for someone to be able to afford a $1.8 million house is $463,000. Okay, let's take a big step back here. So just to get their $389,000 home, where is that house? Like, that's not near any big city, that's for sure. That's certainly not anywhere reasonably close to anything lower mainland on Victoria Island. You're not getting that. That's a hardcore fixer-upper, really, really far away from pretty much anything. That is well out of reach for almost everyone. And I'm going to go on a little bit here, and I'm going to put in some Canadian and American because they're not the same dream, but they're sort of the same. They're sort of the same. So bear with me on that. I want to look at the average income in 1960 was $5,600 in Canada. And by the 1980s, it had risen to $26,700. But during that time, CPI showed that $1 in 1970 bought twice as much than $1.80. That was a huge inflationary period of time, massive. The average home price skyrocketed to $75,000, and by the end of 1980, by 1989, the average home price went up to $273,000. So we can see a rampant inflation in housing. Now, in the 1960s, that was 1950s, 60s, the American dream. That was one person. That's a one-earning household, and you could do that. The U.S. was similar numbers, slightly different. That's one person working. Now you require basically three people to reach that 100,000, because the average person in Canada is also not making 100,000. They're certainly not making 100,000 in the U.S. So, just statistically speaking, numbers wise, it's unattainable. Now, where we're going to move on, and once again, we don't have to focus on the negative. We have to deal with reality. There's a number of things that have happened because of this, but it certainly has changed. And I don't think redefining what the American dream is helpful. Although the conversation that they have, and we'll jump into now Adam, who's on the show. And I love this part. I think we're at the 331 section. Let's listen to what he has to say here.
Thoughts on this? Well, I'll tell you, the old American dream is dead, straight up. But when one door closes, another door opens. The new American dream is as alive and as vibrant as ever. It just depends on what your definition of the American dream is. Back in the day, in the 80s, there used to be a phrase, and tell me if you're familiar with this, Tom, you probably remember this: he who dies with the most toys wins. Remember that? Where you
it was a pop culture t-shirt. It was, it was a consumption mindset. It was
Okay, let's pause here, because that we have once again a generational thing here. Adam is closer, in between me and say a millennial. He gets it. He understands. Yes, that the American dream, that he's using the 80s, but if you look at 50s, 60s, 70s, it was pretty much the same thing. It was being able to afford a home, being able to have stuff, but your costs of living were taken care of. You can do this. You could grow a family if you so choose. They kind of get into the weeds now about what, why you should have a family, should not have a family, which is an important conversation. But part of that is that there has been an attack on that idea that, who would want to live and have that kind of lifestyle, live in a suburb, like Leave It to Beaver. I think if you asked a lot of millennials now, and I grew up in the age group where that was constantly in movies made fun of. That's the most boring, terrible, useless thing you could ever do, is to have kids move to a suburb, blah, 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 all this. That's what Hollywood promoted. What a mistake that was, because most people would actually like that. It's not easy to do, but now younger generations are saying we can't even afford that. And before I go into my whole spiel, let's just wrap up a little bit here at 7:10 mark.
Give you the true side, that this is factual, but it's mathematical that it's true. And then the other side is that you're choosing to accept it. One of the biggest fights I ever had with my dad is, he'll remember this.
This is the wrong one. Sorry, 920. Let's go to 920.
The language of a child, and adults, we don't speak that way. By the way, All of us have. Do you know why we speak that way? Do you know why we speak that way? It's not fair. Why does the other guy get a promotion, not me? It's not fair. Why does the other guy get the right eyeballs and not me? It's not fair. Why is the other guy that get the nice, they share his YouTube channel on the cover of YouTube. How come they don't share our podcast? It's not fair. What do you mean? We all do it. Don't fall for that trap. I think we're being throttled. What's the word? Like our channel
Shadow banned.
We're being shadow banned and throttled.
Here again. So you can kind of see where we're going here. It's not fair. Now, we're unfortunately seeing a lot of Instagram, TikToks of the "it's not fair," or you've stolen my future, this type of stuff. That's not everybody. If you were just to watch a lot of what's promoted on YouTube, on mainstream news, you would be pretty annoyed at a lot of the young generation because they seem awfully. They've been failed. They have been failed by, the generation before and the generation before, not only in education. That's what's got them to where they're at right now. And they're thinking about a lot of strange things. Also on I call it vulture capitalism, in which we've pushed not just to the 1%, but the 0.1% has now become that they hold the cash and they hold amounts of cash that are inconceivable to anybody else. And I don't mind a capitalistic system. That's even exploitive to some degree, but it's being pushed to such an extent that no one else can have it. It's only for that top echelon. And the problem with that, and I'll kind of go now into my big spiel about why this is different than other parts of time, because my whole thesis is I agree with most millennials. It's not that it's not fair, but the dream has been taken. You've been made promises that won't be fulfilled. And it's unfortunate. And it's because, yes, the governments that you voted in, you may have voted them in, but your parents voted them in, that have chosen a model that's a globalist model. This is where I'm coming from. Take it or leave it. Whether you look at the university, it used to be that, yes, you could get into XYZ University in Canada, whether it's McGill, Queen's, Western, University of British Columbia. And you're a Canadian citizen, you'd think, okay, I've got a shot at going to one of those schools if I get good grades. Right now, there's no incentive for them to take a Canadian whenever they can charge 3, 4, 5 times as much to take an international student, where they also know that the government is pushing mass migration, in which they could then hopefully harness and keep that student here to offer them another job as they move on. So they've taken a model of saying, if you've come here in the last 20, 30, 40 years to Canada from either you've lived here or you've come from somewhere else and you've put in the hard work, we may just pass that along to someone else that lives in another country. So the rate of you getting into a college has now opened up to someone in China, in India, and across the globe. And because they want to come here, they're going to come here. And you say, oh, well, you should be able to compete. Well, it's different to compete against the entire planet with billions of people than it is to compete against, say, 30 million people in Canada. That's a very different kind of structure. As well, there's not a lot of new universities that have been built. There's not a lot of new hospitals that have been built to support any of this. That's a whole other conversation. If you go to the US, it's to an extreme, because now it's not just that your state college or say Ivy League, where you go, okay, there's so many students from international studies or places that will go to an Ivy League school. It's now opened up again. And if you are now competing not only against the smartest people in the US, and then it was open to more North America and everything else, you now have to compete against the entire planet again to get into the colleges that you want. That's a failed system and a failed model. And that's a globalist system. It's saying we'll look at everyone across the planet rather than, no, we should be supporting the people in our country to give them the opportunities we promised them. And we did make promises to people. I know specifically in my own family, there was promises made to, say, young women in STEM, in science, tech, engineering. And that has not been true in Canada. And I remember saying to someone in my family that don't believe the hype. They're promoting the STEM thing, especially for women, and they don't have the jobs for it. There aren't a lot of jobs, and that unfortunately that person found that to be the case, even getting their engineering degree at a great university, because there's a big difference between what these politicians are saying, these globalist type of politicians, and what the reality is. Now, this is a big conversation and probably too long for a quick little rant on a Wednesday, but overall, I liked and I disliked what Valuetainment was doing. There has been a lot taken away from this youth. It's harder now to get into a school. It's harder now if you say, yes, I want to work at Goldman Sachs or Merrill Lynch. I worked at Merrill Lynch. It's a lot harder. Your competition pool is 10, 20, 40 times higher than it was even whenever I went for it. So the competition is a lot bigger. It's a lot harder. It's a lot more open. But we haven't actually grown a lot of business. In fact, small and medium businesses have shrunk, and there's been more bankruptcies in small and medium businesses in the US and Canada in the last years as the big multi-conglomerate, huge tech companies are growing. But even if you want to get a job at those companies that are paying $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, the competition is astounding. And there's millions of them. So the model is broken. This globalist kind of model is broken. There needs to be more attention paid to the current people in the country to give them opportunity. And that's what the American dream, regardless of whether or not you think it's about a house in the suburbs or a single life in a condo, whatever it is that it's aspirational. There should be hope. There should be the sense that we as a country and your leader is giving you opportunities, is trying to make it that you have a chance of aspiring to something greater and encouraging you, not into dissuading you from having a family, not to dissuade you from doing certain things or to tell you you should feel guilty or terrible or awful about certain things. It should be aspirational. And I think we're hitting a cusp now where that negativity, where the failures of this experiment that has been done, certainly in the US and Canada, I'd say the West, is starting to reform and reshape. And hopefully we'll have some aspirational ideas start taking focus and take effect. And we can give young people hope that there is a possible future for them. There is a dream. And that, once again, I didn't even talk about the technology side of things. We saw a big technological revolution, say in the 1920s with the cars, industrial revolution. People will liken this fourth industrial revolution to those types of things. I would say it's completely different. Automation, AI, all of these things mean there's going to be a lot of unemployment in the future if they tend to be as good as they're going to be. And once again, the scale of education required to match that is rising rapidly. And while you're letting in more and more people that aren't going to be able to hit that level, what are the rest of the people going to do? So there's lots of important and increasingly difficult questions to be asked and policies to be written that we need to really start honing in on it now. And once again, focus on the people that are here now, to give them a chance to make something and to aspire to more. That's what we're really missing. And I'm hoping that in the near future, that hope and that fire and that aspiration will start to change, and we'll start to see a change in culture and attitude, and certainly in the young people to have more hope, because I get to see a ton of really bright, smart young people. And that's not reflected in the TikToks, the Instagrams, and all of these other things where you kind of shake your head and go, oh my goodness, we're in trouble. That's not the case. Social media is wonderful in some ways and absolutely toxic and terrible in other ways. I think we have to separate those two things and focus in on the positive and really help to inspire people. Let me know what you think. This has been quite a long rant. I didn't mean it to be quite so long, but it really brought up a lot of interesting questions, and I'd love to hear your feedback on it as well.